Welcome to another episode of Dad Up, everyone. Thank you guys very much for joining me. I'm excited to have my guest on today because he's got a big story and he's done a lot in his life, and he has a awesome family that I'm very interested in learning more about, and his parenting style, obviously. But he and I have just gotten a chance to connect over the last couple of months or so through social media, and I wanted to have him on to talk about his experiences. But my good friend Jeff Lerner has joined me on Dad Up. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you, Brian. So grateful to be here with you and your audience.
Awesome. Let's do this. Let's start off from the very beginning. Let me know a little bit about you, kind of your backstory, kind of how you grew up, and then obviously how you got into the things you're doing now. And then this is a dad podcast, so I want to know about your family as well.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I'll give you the quick version, and then you can call out anything you want to double click on. I mean, basically, I grew up. I was an only child to successful professional working parents. Mom was an attorney. Dad was an investment advisor. So, they modeled hard work, discipline, consistency, and the success that can come from that. So I would say I had a privileged upbringing. No, I would say no major traumas, domestic traumas, let's say, none of that stuff. Although I did accumulate what I would call what do they call it? Chronic trauma or sustained trauma, or whatever, which is basically I was born with a genetic condition called Waardenburg syndrome, which is as Waardenburg cases go, I'm very fortunate. I'm not deaf, for one, which later was significant because I became a professional musician, but I'm only sort of minimally affected by it. But it kind of has a look, and I've grown into it. You don't probably notice it as much now, but when I was a kid, I had a lot of people suggest that I was mentally challenged. Like I just kind of looked like I might, I don't know, had a thing, right? And so that coupled with the fact that I wasn't mentally challenged, and in fact, I fancied myself pretty dang smart, and I like to show people how smart I was to overcome the what I felt was this unfair perception, turned me into basically a smartass, if I can say that. And so that only compounded the bullying and the ostracization and the sense of isolation. It's like he looks different and he's kind of a smartass. So I got bullied a lot as a kid. Like it was like I had this super loving home and great parents, but I had this experience when I was outside of the home that was as bad as my home life was good. And so I developed, I think, a real sense of isolationism from a pretty early age. Like I'm okay as long as I just hunker down and kind of do my own thing. And that ended up, I became a musician who spent most of his time practicing alone. I became an entrepreneur who spends endless strings of hours building ideas and working stuff out. Like it ended up having some benefits, but that was kind of my start in life. And then I always had, partly because of that, I just sort of had such a negative experience in school that I ended up dropping out in high school. I think it's fun. Hindsight is wonderful, right? We can see why we made these huge choices that we made. And I think basically what I decided was people aren't very nice. The community isn't something that I really see myself integrating with, or that I frankly desire to conform to or fit in with, because they're not very nice. So I kind of let go of the need. In certain ways, I let go of the need to belong, but then it flared up in other ways because as human beings, we can never really let go of that need. But I kind of developed this sense of like, I don't need to fit in, which means I don't need to go to school, which means I don't need to get a job someday, which means I don't need to follow the traditional path. And so by high school, I was just like, I want to be myself. I want to be a musician. I want to find something to do where I can at least put food on the table, but really be independent, creative, and free. So I dropped out of high school and committed, I'm going to become a world-class musician at 16 years old. And I was not at that point. I had played a little guitar and a little piano, but I wasn't like any kind of child prodigy or virtuoso or anything. And so I was like, at 16, I said, I told my parents, like, I'm dropping out of high school. But all the hard work you've wanted to see from me the whole time I've been in school, you will now see from me, but it will be at becoming a musician. And I started practicing 10, 12 hours a day. My parents actually bought me a piano and somewhat supported me, or at least resigned themselves that I wasn't going to be talked out of it. And for the next, let's say 3 to 5 years, I just worked obsessively at becoming a professionally proficient piano player. And actually, even without a high school diploma, I was able to get into college on a jazz piano scholarship, and started working gigs and had a really nice career all through my 20s as a working jazz and session and club and weddings and like whatever would pay the bills piano player in Houston, Texas. But also that was very economically hard and very personally hard. I never made much money, obviously, as a, jazz musician. Mm-hmm. The only thing broker than a musician is a jazz musician. Right. So, and then also personally struggled a lot. I got married and divorced twice in my 20s because I was living this life where I'm out till 4 a.m. I'm playing at clubs, and it just wasn't really tenable. And I was broke all the time. I've learned that's not a super attractive quality with women. So anyway, by late 20s, I had also been starting businesses all through my 20s. I kind of started to develop this sense of like, I don't want to be broke and struggling my whole life, but I also don't want to conform and go get a job. So, and a lot of my best clients were successful entrepreneurs who would have me come play piano in their homes. And so I kind of attached this idea to becoming a successful entrepreneur. So I was always starting businesses, but I didn't have any money. So I'd like join an MLM on a credit card, or do a cash advance to try to flip a house. Or I ended up starting like close to a dozen businesses in my 20s, failed repeatedly and miserably, got very good at failing and bouncing back. And by my late 20s, I was in $500,000 in debt from a couple of franchise restaurants that I had taken on SBA loans for. And that was 2008. So the Great Recession. I'm now a broke jazz musician who's been evicted from his apartment because he can't pay his rent. I'm heading towards my second divorce, and I'm now $495,000 in debt with the federal government hounding me for these SBA loans. And that's when I discovered the world of online business, which I was a quick study at. I like to joke that I'm pretty good. When you set me at any sort of keyboard, I can usually figure it out. And that was kind of the low point and the beginning of a turnaround. And since then, I've had a number of successful, largely digitally based businesses, and also rebuilt my life personally, got remarried to a wonderful woman that had 3 kids who I've adopted. And then we've now added a 4th kid. And life is good despite all that turmoil.
Well, all right. So you go from essentially broke and homeless to essentially living your dream life.
Yeah.
You're happily married, kids, and successful. You have a podcast as well. You're an author of a book. Let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, what's the purpose behind your book? What was the reason behind writing that?
Yeah, so it's all the same purpose. My book, my podcast, my education platform, which is called Entre Institute. The book and podcast are both called Unlock Your Potential. Entre Institute is an entrepreneurial education platform on the internet. And we have live events too. And all of that sources back to 2018. So in 2018, as you alluded, I was capping off a 10-year turnaround, right? So 2008, that was that rock bottom that I described. And over the next 10 years, I remarried, adopted kids, did a ton of therapy, became, initially a decent father. And now I consider myself a reasonably good one, still with lots of room to improve. And it's always a work in progress. Also dealt with a lot of physical transformation. I'm about 55 pounds lighter than I was at my heaviest and my most depressed. And I'm probably today, I'm not in the best shape of my life, but I would say on average over the last 5 years, I've been in very good physical shape. And then professionally, from 2008 to 2018, I started doing these different types of online businesses, and gross, I generated $55 million in sales on the internet in 10 years. And obviously I don't get to pocket all of that, but I was able to take home a good enough chunk of that I basically woke up one day in the fall of 2018 and I had just sold my business. I had a digital agency and I just sold it to a software business. And I woke up and I was like, dude, this is not only better than I deserve physically, personally, and professionally, but also, dang, how did I get here? Right. And I remember standing in my front yard, looking around at the neighbors' houses. I live in a, call it an upper middle class neighborhood in a little suburban enclave of St. George, Utah. And I'm looking around at the neighbors, and I got a neighbor who's a banker. I got a neighbor who's a VP of sales. I got a neighbor who's, these are all successful professionals. But the difference between them and me on a Tuesday morning is that I was home and they weren't. And so I'm sort of looking at my life going, man, this, where I was 10 years ago to where I am now, basically retired, like this is too much. I gotta, and I see all these other people that like, they did what they were supposed to do. They took on the student debt. Like I went to college, but I never paid for it. I got a jazz piano scholarship, and I went to a fairly inexpensive local university in Houston where I grew up. But I mean, people take on hundreds of thousands of dollars in student debt that they don't, I started doing the research. They don't pay it off till they're in their late 40s, if ever. They are trading more and more time for less and less money on a purchasing power basis. Retirement is basically becoming a fiction, other than maybe the top 1 to 5% of earners. And this was 2018, but I kind of saw the writing on the wall with it, currency inflation and the way the Federal Reserve was starting to just print money like it was, like it didn't impact like when you print all these dollars, let's pretend it doesn't impact all these other dollars that already exist. Right. And I was like, man, I just feel like the good heart of America working class is about to get devastated. And here I am, 39-year-old, formerly broke jazz musician who's basically retired, hanging out in his front yard on a Tuesday morning.
Right.
And so I started teaching the world about the digital economy, about entrepreneurship, trying to give awareness and perspective to where I saw the world going and be a, kind of a wake-up call for people. And that has grown into this movement, which is now my education platform, Entra. That's, we've had over 250,000 customers of something who have bought a course or a training or a coaching or attended an event or something. It's been kind of amazing. And then also the book and the podcast. And I would say now my life is devoted to, first and foremost, living a life that proves what's possible. And secondly, and a close second, evangelizing, standing for, and helping try to teach people how to achieve it for themselves.
Yeah. I want to ask you about the online part of things, because you have obviously the coaching and the education training, all those things that people can sign up for and get help from you for. But when you started off, where you said here you are standing out on your front lawn and looking around and everybody's at work and you're not, because you've built a successful online business where you essentially don't have to go to a job, a job, right? What was that business? I mean, how did that all happen?
Sure.
It always fascinates me when I speak to entrepreneurs. They go, this is what I did. And it just seems like it was just so quick and easy, but it's really not. So I want to know from you, how did that all come about?
Well, I appreciate that. What I will spare you, although if you or your listeners want to grab a copy of my book, Unlock Your Potential, you'll get to read the whole story. I chronicle 11 different failures all through my 20s. So the notion of fast and easy success, I know that's not what you were suggesting, but right. I actually embody how unfast and uneasy it really was pretty well. But I did I remember Mark Cuban saying, he's like, the thing about being an entrepreneur is you've only got to get it right one time. You could fail 100 times and get it right once. I played piano for a guy named Bob McNair, who was a billionaire, the owner of the Houston Texans football team. And there's a whole story I tell in my book about how I impressed him because I was able to play the new fight song for the Houston Texans and help him debut it for the coaches at this dinner that he was hosting. And I picked it out from kind of a composer's scribble on some piece of paper. So he was like really grateful, like, oh, this pianist helped me have a successful, house party. So he ended up kind of spending some time with me to just say he was grateful and talk about the event. And one of the things I got to hear him tell his story. This guy failed at 18 different businesses, and he didn't get it right till his early 40s. But the one time he got it right, he made his first billion. And so I just had that's the thing about entrepreneurship. Like, you've only got to get it right one time. And so, in 2008, I finally got it right. And I've been fortunate now to string together a sequence of, call it, getting it right, each one kind of a little better than the next. But it's just because fundamentally I figured out how to do it. And once I cracked it, I didn't go back to life before I had cracked it. And so what happened in 2008 was I discovered a business model called affiliate marketing, where you basically promote products on the internet through links. People click the links. If they buy that product, you, as the referring affiliate, earn a commission. And I joined an affiliate marketing training platform in November of 2008. Again, I was at rock bottom, $495,000 in debt, and I had a credit card and $395 to. When you're already $495,000 in debt, like
what's another $395?
Yeah. It was basically just when are the banks going to cut me off, right? And so I joined this platform, and that I was a quick study at that. I mean, I say I was a quick study. I have a pretty well-developed ability to sit at a keyboard and work hard at something for like 14 hours a day. Basically, every second that I'm not having to eat, sleep, or use the restroom, or optionally maybe shower here and there, I'll just work. And it took about 6 months, but in 6 months, I went from a $395 investment and making $110 gross my first month. So I was upside down. And 6 months later, I was doing between, $40,000 and $70,000 a month in affiliate commissions, and paid off $495,000 in debt in about 19 months. I think it was 19 months technically. And that was obviously a massive springboard. Now I'm out of debt. Now I have location freedom. I moved. I just kind of, and at that point, I'm learning the skills, the most valuable, what I believe are the most valuable skills in the world, which are the intersection of marketing and technology. There's a function in business called MarTech, which is like your marketing technologist. And this is everything from building sales funnels, understanding video sales letters, knowing how to write copy, knowing how to run online traffic. There's a whole cluster of skills that if you have them, even just as a service provider, you're basically locked into or multiple six-figure life from anywhere you want in the world if you have those skills. And if you build a business with them, you can obviously do even better than that.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. Really fascinating how, and I always like to ask, because it always piques my interest on how people get to where they're at now and what really motivated them to get there. And I think, yeah, go ahead.
I want to share one other thing because to sort of illustrate a point. So I did affiliate marketing for 5 years. I got out of that business for some reasons that don't matter. Started a digital agency to say, hey, I've got this skill set. Now let me use those same skills to go help local and small, medium-sized local businesses attract more clients online, work on their online footprint, build their online reputation, SEO, Google Maps optimization, right? So I did that, had that agency for like 6 years. That's what I ended up selling in 2018. But I also launched an online direct sales company that created personal development products and sold them online. I also had a couple different e-commerce stores. And so the reason I share all that is over the course of, let's say, 10 years, I had 4 different, well, if you count the e-com stores, I think 5 different businesses that all succeeded, but they basically were all variations on the same theme, on the same basic set of skills. And that's why the reason I wanted to share that is, like, when I say it's about the skills, once you have these skills, they're like, it's like wizard, Harry Potter wizard powers, right? And I incarnated them 5 different or 6 different ways over the course of that decade to get to that result. And so, I think a lot of people that maybe hear this, they're like, oh, I'm going to go find an online business to get involved in or something. I want to do, my equivalent of this story. And a lot of businesses out there are being promoted as like, this is the magic one. This is the one size fits all solution. It's not the business. It's the skills that you develop that allow you ultimately to succeed with that business or a variety of others. And I think that's a really important distinction, because I think a lot of times people are looking for a magic external solution instead of just building themselves internally and what they're capable of.
Oh, I absolutely agree. And that works the same in anything that you're doing, whether you're a parent, right, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're in corporate America, it doesn't matter. I absolutely agree with that, yeah, I mean, you can only go so far with the business based on what you learn and do yourself. So the business isn't going to run itself essentially when you first get going in it. And same thing when it comes to parenting. I mean, our kids are not going to understand life and how to get through it if we don't guide them and support them and lead them the way that we were led and guided and supported. So absolutely agree with that. Now, you said you have 4 kids, 3 adopted. What are their ages, and how are your relationship with each of them as they, progress through age?
So they are 20, 19, 14, and 7 right now. When
That's
I met
quite a
my
range.
wife, it is. And when I met my wife, she was also supposedly done having kids, she told me, but they were 8, 7, and 2 when I met her.
Okay.
And I kind of came into the pictures like mom's boyfriend, but there was no father, no other father figure in the picture. She was actually a widow. And so I met her, came into the picture, mom's boyfriend. I love these kids. And I guess I'll answer the question about the relationship I have now. So those 3 kids, I've been their dad now for, let's say, 12 years. And then obviously we added our own, who's biologically mine, but I don't really consider them more or less mine, who's 7 years ago. And honestly, the relationships are amazing because I think I had a really unique advantage coming in with I would say, like, there was no biological incumbency. Like I had no claim to being their parents, except that which would be offered by them and by their mom. And so I came in not like, okay, well, I had a kid, so I'm a dad now. I came in going, so, okay, I'm this woman's boyfriend and I love these kids. But if I'm ever going to be considered or worthy of a role as their father, I want to be really, really good at it. I don't want there to be a big opportunity cost that they suffer or they pay as children because their mom chose me rather than someone else. So I actually approached becoming a father like a new startup business. And I bought books and I took classes and I enrolled in therapy. And my therapist also taught parenting classes, and he taught inner sentence classes, which is like trauma reversal kind of stuff. And I did cognitive behavioral therapy for years, and I still do. And I really took on, I saw parenting. I mean, there's a lot of different ways I saw it and experienced it. One of which was, wow, this is what the healing power of unconditional love feels like, because these kids are loving me in a way I've never felt before. 2 is, this is a great platform for personal development. Like I can, there's an endless amount of work I can do on myself that'll never be complete in terms of becoming a better parent. And also just like, dang, this is really fun. And so that's why I think I had a unique opportunity to work on myself as a parent before I was fully declared to be a parent. And that therapy, and I'm saying it, I'm kind of glossing over it. I mean, it was messy. It was dark. I had a lot of stuff to pull out and deal with, and I was very damaged. My wife, she had, obviously, with her experience of being widowed, and abandoned, and she was widowed by suicide. So like, she had some stuff and we both I had ex-wives, I had failed marriages, she had failed marriages. Like, we just had all this stuff we had to work through while simultaneously trying to create this new thing that could be wonderful for her children and now our children. And fast forward to now, and I think we're at least in the process of suggesting that we've pulled it off, because it's pretty wonderful.
That's so awesome. I think that when we look at parenting, you're right. We look at it like especially for an entrepreneur, you said you looked at it like you were starting a new business, and you had to kind of, I guess, mold it, your parenting style. You had to mold it into who these kids are, because you were brought into them. They weren't brought into you. Right. But I'm curious to know now, based on your relationship over the years with them, do they call you dad? Because they're, I mean, okay, all right, cool,
yeah, 100%.
That's awesome.
I mean, so just for perspective, so our 20 and 19-year-old boys, she was pregnant with the second of them when their biological father took his own life. So they've never known him. And they were, for 8 and 7, they had just been raised by a single mom when I met them. And then the 2-year-old, her biological parent actually abandoned my wife the day he found out she was pregnant. He's like, I don't want to be a dad, I'm out. And so she had never known him. And so when I met, there was no competing father figure. And it was only about 6 weeks into dating her that the 2-year-old, the word daddy slipped out of her mouth in my direction. And that was, I mean, at risk of a cliche, like that was a wholesale spiritual transformation in a singular moment. The second I heard her say daddy, I became, it's not that I became a different person. I became aware of a different possible person for myself. And I committed to whatever I had to do for the next, as long as it took to become the person that was worthy of that designation.
And you still remember that to this day.
I literally get chills. And I mean, I talked about this 2 days. Today, I must be on like a tranquil mood or something. 2 days ago, I was on a podcast. And I started crying when I told that story.
No, I mean, I like to talk to, when I talk to dads on the podcast, I like to say that, you can never explain the love between a parent and a child to somebody that's not a parent, that doesn't have a child. You can't explain the love. It's a completely different love. It's a completely different, it's a different level that you're on to people that aren't parents. And, some people out there don't want to have kids, and that's fine. That's their prerogative. That's what they want to do. That's fine. But to get to a place where you're a parent and you have this responsibility of raising, God's children for him, it's just a completely different level than anything you can ever imagine, whether it's an entrepreneur working in corporate America, not having kids. I mean, you just can't explain it. And the way that you talk about it gives me chills too, because I know that feeling. I know that sense that you were feeling when she said that. I could put myself in your shoes. And that's just really, really remarkable. And you have essentially checked in as a dad. When you laced up the dad shoes, that was it. You're like, this is what I'm here to do. And I'm going to raise these kids the best that I can. That's awesome.
Well, thanks. Yeah, it's the best thing, best job I've ever, well, I haven't had a lot of jobs, but it's definitely the best.
What have you taught them about your journey in, the entrepreneurial world? Because my boys don't want to work in corporate America. They don't want to be tied down to somebody else. They want to do something on their own. What kind of influence have you brought to your kids, especially the older ones?
Yeah. So, I really am committed to letting them find their own way. Like, I'm not trying to steer them toward or away from a job or a business or anything. It's kind of like I was saying earlier. It's really about building their own internal skills and character and sense of value that creates opportunities, right? I think a lot of people go searching for opportunities. I think what I've probably encouraged them is don't so much search for opportunities to like earn or gain. Search for opportunities to learn and grow, because the more you learn and grow, the more you build your own value and your own internal sense of self-worth, the more you'll create your own opportunities. And that's the biggest message I would say that I stand for. And, if you read my book, a lot of it talks about the educational system, where I think that society is moving in a direction. It's kind of like, I mean, there's that saying, which admittedly was taken dramatically out of context, but I forget his name, Klaus, whatever, at the World Economic Forum, basically said, in the future that we envision for the world, you will own nothing and you'll be happy. And that saying, which again, I'm not saying I think it gets twisted to be like, see, they're trying to tell us that we're going to be happy. Like that we'll be happy about owning nothing. That's not what they're saying. They're just saying you won't own anything, but that'll be okay because all your needs will be met and you'll be fulfilled and you'll be happy. Right. But if you think about that spirit of that trajectory for the world, well, I may be whether I'm happy or not, whatever happiness I experience is from a place of being completely dependent on whatever institutional construct provides me a life, whether it's a place to live or money to buy food with or food that I don't have to pay money for anymore or whatever. Like, we're going in this direction where as technology evolves and as the world gets bigger and bigger and bigger, we have this sense of like, it's okay, we'll be taken care of. I think that's terrifying. I don't think that's true to the human spirit. in my years of therapy, the number one concept that was reinforced to me more than probably all others put together is that dependency creates hostility, because dependency creates a fear of loss. And then and anger is always a mask for fear. And I would say the reason the world seems so angry these days is because the world is so hopelessly dependent and so interconnected that like when you're not self-sufficient, you have a lot of reasons to be mad. Because if somebody threatens your whatever, that's a piece of your survival equation, anger flares up, right? And so I'm telling my kids, like, no, you got to build your own value. You got to build your own skill set. You got to build your own earning potential. You got to build your own unique perspective that stands out in a world that is so crowded. Basically, you've got to, don't worry about what company you're going to go work for. Think about you incorporated and grow the enterprise value of you incorporated, you yourself. And then you won't end up dependent, which means you won't end up angry. That's basically my message to my kids.
It's about building self-worth. That's what it comes down to. Yeah. It's about building self-worth.
And it's self-worth. Like self-worth is kind of a vague term of like, well, how do I feel about myself? Well, on the basis of what? If you're unskilled, you don't know how to do any things that are relevant and highly valued in the modern economy. You are clumsy at relationships. You communicate with people in a way that doesn't feel that good to be on the other side of. Therefore, you're not effective in relationships. Maybe you don't have great health. You haven't demonstrated to yourself over time that you will consistently keep your own commitments that result in good health and good habits and good, success compounding over time. Like you probably haven't earned good self-worth at that point in terms of the world. I'm not saying there isn't some intrinsic created beauty in each of us, but like, I want to take it beyond just like go self-esteem. It's no like build self-esteem. Like you need to be able to write down on a piece of paper at any given time, these are the things I'm doing to build self-esteem, because otherwise I think you could argue that you're proceeding toward a delusion of deserving that's not validated by the market.
Yeah. I think, when I talk to entrepreneurs, one of the things that I find interesting is that you guys as entrepreneurs, you face a lot of challenges, and sometimes those challenges get in the way of our family dynamics, our relationship with our spouses, or our relationship with our kids. How do you deal with challenges, and what kind of lessons do you teach your kids through those challenges to help them, learn or grow? Maybe they want to become an entrepreneur. They know how to handle things, especially around their families.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, probably the biggest thing I'll say, and I'll use my two boys. One is highly entrepreneurial. The other is in the IT space. He's in college and he's studying IT, and he's much more somebody that's going to be a very meaningful cog in a larger machine of other cogs, right? But and I don't say that disparagingly, right? So it's again, I'm not trying to make anybody right or wrong for any life choice, but I agree. I do think I represent to my children a lot of resilience and a lot of grit. I mean, they've seen me start businesses. They've seen me get up at 3, like since I started Entre in fall of 2018, other than like maybe if we're on vacation, I mean, I've been up usually by at least 4 a.m. every day for 5 years now. And they've seen that, knowing that actually I don't have to work for money. So they've seen me model grit, resilience, hard work, consistency, discipline. And I think that goes to the reality of how you deal with challenges. To your question, I have a few friends that are Navy SEALs, and I'm kind of a dilettante at like studying SEAL lore and SEAL sayings. And I just have a huge regard for people that do that kind of stuff. And one of the things that they always say is like, by the time you need to be ready, it is way too late to get ready. Right. And so, I mean, the way you deal with challenges is you're always dealing with them ahead of time. You're always building yourself. You're always building your resources and your capacity, your endurance, your pain threshold, your wealth, your tool set. You're always building it so that when you get to it, so that you can start to have this attitude of like, oh, another challenge. Okay. How can I not default to fear? How can I not default to adrenaline? How can I not default to central nervous system overwhelm? I mean, I had somebody say to me once that ultimately your ceiling is defined by the limits. Your ceiling in life, your ceiling in success is defined by the limits of your central nervous system. And that's really what it comes down to, more than like a tactic usually for people. And so you can't wait to start training your central nervous system. You got to be building that muscle every day. And so, and so in terms of parenting relationships, I think there's a corollary to this, which is don't wait until there's a problem with your kids to try to intervene or build that connection or give them that attention. You know, you've got to be making all these deposits at neutral times to build that relationship so that when they have a challenge, first of all, they'll actually come to you.
Right.
Right. They'll feel safe. They'll feel empowered. And what have you modeled for them about how to deal with challenges? Like all that work needs to start immediately, if not 20 years ago or however old your kids are, because by the time there's a challenge, it's probably too late to learn how to deal with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I like to tell, I coach a lot of dads and stuff. And one of the things that I talk to them about is they stress so much about worrying about their business and not enough worry or attention is placed on the family. And I'm a big believer in the structure of the family really builds everything else around us. So if there's cracks in the foundation of your family, there's probably going to be cracks in the foundation of your business. There's probably going to be cracks in the foundation of your health. There's probably going to be cracks in the foundation of your finances. All those different things happen if your family structure isn't intact. If there's no cracks there, then you're probably pretty level-headed everywhere else, right? But when it comes to our kids, one of the things that I tell them is stop trying to focus so much on the business outside of the home. You need to really start putting a lot of focus on the family inside the home, because there's going to be a point in time where if you're not, like you said, making those deposits, if you are not making those deposits in your family, in your wife, in your spouse, in your kids, if you're not making those deposits over time, eventually there's going to become a time when something needs to take place or something's happened. And they're not going to want to come to you, not because they don't necessarily, I use feeling safe too, but that may not be necessarily the case. It may just be, he's too busy. He's too busy for me. He's got other things on his mind and I don't want to stress him out. Oh, dad's doing this and I know he's really worried about it, so I don't want to bother him with the stuff that I'm feeling. And what happens is our kids turn to other things. They turn to other people. They turn to other kids. They turn to drugs. They turn to smoking. They turn to drinking. They turn to all these other areas that eventually lead down a very bad road. And I think for parents, it's important to understand what Jeff just talked about there is making these deposits into our kids' lives at the time of right before they're born. I mean, you're talking to the baby in the womb. When they're born, you're making these deposits into that child's life. So that way that child can feel safe and know to come to you. My boys, I have a 22-year-old and a 24-year-old, and they have always felt safe around my wife and I. And I have told my boys, I don't care what it is you've done or haven't done. If you ever need to talk or come to me about something, don't ever be afraid to come and talk to me. And I'll tell you this, I may, and I've told them this many times, I may be disappointed in you. I can be disappointed, but it doesn't mean I don't love you any less. And it doesn't mean I'm not going to help you through it. So don't ever feel like our home is not a safe space, because it's your safe space.
Yeah. I think so one metaphor that came to mind while you were sharing just now is like, don't wait until you need a loan to start working on your credit score.
Right.
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 And that's how I look at it, is like even making these deposits, the day will come, I need to make a big withdrawal, right, with my kid, or they're coming to me, Dad, I need not a financial loan, but I need to borrow some love or some time or some energy or some attention or some insight, right? Like you have to have been building that account or that score the whole time. The other thing I'll say that I think is something that we embraced early on, my wife and I, is I think and it was specific to my role. I think there's a lot of times a thought in daddom if that's a word, that like part of our job is toughen up our kids. It's a man, dog eat dog world out there. And you got to go out there and be armored up and ready to, the world's going to hit back. You got, okay, look, and we decided early on, our therapist was like, listen, the reality is the world is going to teach your kids all those lessons. The world is going to force your kid to toughen up. The world is going to teach your kid that it's a dog eat dog world. The world is going to teach your kid that there's a social pecking order, and every place on that pecking order has price tags and good aspects. Like your kids don't need you to be the one to make them tough by being hard on them. Your kids, they go out every day from the time they're 3 to 5 years old, and they live in that world that's constantly teaching them all that stuff. They need to be able to come home to basically a big, warm blanket of love.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't mean that you coddle them or you spoil them or you overindulge them. But this idea, this old school, like, man's man, like we just decided early on, like, I don't want a damn thing to do with any of that. First of all, I don't like the way it feels.
Mm-hmm.
And the world's going to be hard enough on them. When they come home, it should always be a place of love. And and it's not just what you say, it's how it feels.
Right. Yeah,
and that's how you treat your wife too.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. I think that, I have seen many parents try that approach, and I've witnessed many things that have gone wrong with that approach. And you're right. Listen, the therapist that you're mentioning there is absolutely right. Life's going to hit our kids on the chin, whether we want it to or not. It's going to happen. But as long as they know that they have love and support around them to guide them and help them and love them and just be there for them, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And you know what? Sometimes your kids, just like us as adults, excuse me, sometimes life does need to hit them on the chin. That's where they grow. That's where they start to separate themselves from everybody else. That's where the growth really happens, is when those challenges come. How do we get through them? But we have the love and support of our family and our parents. Those types of things are all important. I think that teaching our kids, especially when it comes to dads, stop being so hard on your damn kids. Stop being so hard on them. Let them be kids. They're going to grow up in a life, in a world that's going to be hard enough on them. So there's no reason for you to be hard on them, to try to teach them something. It's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous way to raise a child. Now, I'm not saying like you said, let's coddle our kids, let's protect them from everything, let's put them in a bubble, all those kinds of things. No, I'm not saying that. But being hard on our kids is just going to cause them to resent you. It's just going to cause them to run from you to something else because they can't trust you. So,
yeah, I feel like nothing as a parent should ever feel like no aspect of me should ever feel like to my child like something they can fail at. Fail to get his approval because I wasn't good enough at sports. Fail to get his approval because I didn't get a good enough grade. Fail to get his approval because, with the feminine or the mom, a lot of times it's more like qualifying for love. With the masculine or the dad, it's a lot of times more it's qualifying for esteem or respect or approval. Mm. And that stuff just has to be so freely given, I think. Because if not you, where? Then they just grow up going, okay, I know when I leave the home, unconditional acceptance and approval doesn't exist. And it doesn't exist when I come back to the home. Therefore, it must not exist. Therefore, I'm going to live a dramatically different life based on that belief or that experience than I would otherwise. And I think we end up promulgating a lot of hardship in the world when we raise our kids that way.
Yeah.
Sorry. You can tell I feel strongly about this. I'm kind of
no, absolutely. I love it. I appreciate it. Jeff, for my listeners, viewers that want to look you up, maybe learn a little bit more about you, maybe learn about Entre, maybe learn about your book or your podcast, best places for them to do all that.
You can just go to my website, jefflernerofficial.com. There's a drop down that says learn how to, and then you click the drop down and it's like attend a workshop, read the book, listen to the podcast, get free training on YouTube. And there's a whole bunch of stuff, right? But all the spokes converge at jefflernerofficial.com. there's one other thing I think I'll share very briefly. If you look at my professional life sort of stair step, where like I was an affiliate marketer, which basically means I figured out how to make good personal income, but I would not say that I was a leader. I was not a team builder. I was not a strong communicator. I was not a visionary that was out having positive impact in the world. I basically just learned how to like promote links and earn commissions. And so I started my agency in 2012. I started my e-com store, I started my online direct sales company in 2016. And then I wound that down and sold the agency. I started my education platform in 2018. And now I have multiple other businesses. I wrote a book. I have a podcast. Like now I would say I actually have some demonstrated success as a leader, as a team builder, as a community organizer, as somebody that there is evidence in the world that other people actually like aligning with me. And I'm now seeing the power. Like if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. When you have the ability to draw people together, you can do extraordinary things. That didn't come from management classes. It didn't come from reading a book on scaling a business. That came from therapy. It came from parenting, and it came from being a husband. And I, in a million years, had no idea that when I started really, really working on myself as a personal, personally in terms of like empathy and thoughtful communication and understanding the energy and how it felt to be around me. When I started working on that stuff, like I would basically say I have about $200 million worth of revenue that I attribute to doing that work. And I never saw it crossing over into business. Now I look at it, I'm like, oh, this is the secret to good business, is doing this personal work, being a person that it feels good to be in connection and relationship with. So I wanted to share that perspective, that I don't think these are isolated conversations. I think they're the same conversation.
No, I'm a firm believer and a big advocate for therapy. I actually, I'm a big advocate for therapy, not only for individuals, but for couples. My wife and I have a marriage coach that we go to once a month, and she's a licensed family therapist, but we go to her once a month. We sit down for an hour and a half and we talk about stuff, and we love it. We actually look forward to going. And it's not, we don't do it because we have problems. We do it so we don't have problems. We do it so we don't face hurdles or challenges. And when we do face those challenges, how do we get through them? Well, this is what we learned in all these years of working with our marriage coach. We've been going to her now for 4 years. And personal therapy is great. I've just started doing hypnosis to kind of get me through some of my past issues that I have in, growing up as a child and all that kind of stuff. There's certain things mentally that I have to get through and that I still struggle with today. And hypnosis has been one of those things that is just kind of, I've tried and looking forward to continuing doing that. But constantly working on ourselves, self-development is so crucial. And sometimes that does come down to, hey, sitting with a therapist and talking with a therapist. I have a therapist that I meet with every single week. I meet with a therapist every single week, a personal therapist. And
love it. Yeah. It's like going to the gym.
Yeah.
That's how I look at it. It's preventative maintenance and continuous self-improvement.
Right. Exactly. So any dads out there, any moms out there, you guys want to go and check out maybe some of the therapy or something to help you maybe become a better parent. Do it. Don't be afraid to. There's no shame in going to therapy. There really isn't. It's actually good for you. So, well, cool. I appreciate, Jeff, you sharing that. I'll make sure all the links are in the show notes, but I appreciate you being on, and I appreciate, what you represent as not only a businessman, but also a dad and a husband. And I am really looking forward to, growing this friendship, further.
No, I appreciate that, man. Good dads are what the world needs. And anybody that's out there helping dads continue to be and continue to improve as good dads, man, I mean, you're doing God's work. So thank you.
Thank you very much for saying that. Listen, guys, this has been another awesome episode of Dad Up Podcast. And please do me a favor. Go check out Jeff Lerner's website. It's in the show notes. You check out his book, look at his podcast, listen to it, give it a listen. Maybe you want to attend one of his classes. Maybe you need some coaching. Maybe you need something you need to work on in your own business that maybe Jeff can help you out with. So make sure that you check out what he's doing and reach out to him if you have questions. And as always, if you have not yet subscribed to my show, please make sure you do that so you don't miss any of the awesome guests that I have on each and every week. And as always, I look forward to seeing you all in the next episode of Dad Up.
Wow.
Another amazing episode in the books. So much was shared, and I'm truly grateful my guest was able to pour into you to help you elevate your dad game and really dad up. Make sure you bang that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. And while you're here, please don't forget to leave me a rating and a review. I always appreciate the feedback. And one last thing, don't forget, your role as a dad is one of the most important roles you have. So if you need a little help or have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me on my website at daduptribe.com or at my Instagram page at daduppodcast. Until next time, everyone, dad up.